Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the results are in. It's a big day for Scottish school pupils, and a record number of them have achieved a place at university. Also in the programme, could Edinburgh be on track for more disruption as councillors say they'll look at the case for extending the city's tramline? The Scottish charity making former war zones safer gets a government funding boost. A former Olympian questions Laura Muir's race strategy after she just missed out on a medal at the World Championships. And he was a winner at Leicester Tigers. Can new head coach Richard Cockerell bring success to Edinburgh Rugby? Good evening. Scotland's exam results day has meant a record number of pupils gaining a place at university, including an increase in applicants from some of the country's most deprived communities. The government described it as a steady performance and a base for further progress. Critics, though, said students did well despite SNP policy. Here's our education correspondent, Jamie McIver.
For almost 140,000 people, today could prove to be one of the defining days of their life, and a few volunteered to be filmed. Exam Results Day is a celebration of success for all who did well, not just the academic elite expecting straight A's. At this school in Airdrie, there are many measures of success.
All of the summer, all I've been thinking about has been this coming here, opening up my letter and like, I'm going to fail, everyone's going to watch it, I'm going to cry, it's not going to be good. But when I saw it, I was speechless.
My mum was actually crying as soon as I opened the envelope, and I texted my dad as well, so they're both quite proud of me.
I was off school all last year with a chronic illness, and then I came back this year. It's a big achievement having these results this year.
The qualification system is designed to provide something for everyone. The challenge for schools is to use that system to do what's right for each student.
We target every single young person. Our job is to ensure that we bring youngsters up to the required levels of literacy, numeracy and health and well-being in their lives, because what we are in charge of are young people's life chances.
But the higher results are still seen as a benchmark. Nationally, the number of entries for Highers actually dropped slightly. It was down 3,000 on last year. This seems to be because of the number of youngsters. The pass rate also fell very slightly to 77%.
Candidates have achieved very well, and I want to congratulate them all. It's a very stable result. I think if you look at across the board, it's pretty similar across all levels from last year.
The Scottish Government sees this as a solid, steady performance. Its critics say students did well despite government policy.
We're on a journey of continuous improvement within Scottish education. Today's results give us enormous confidence about the strength that exists within Scottish education, but we're determined to build on that. And the investments that we're making in pupil equity funding, which is supporting the measures that are designed to close the attainment gap in Scottish education, will bear fruit in the years to come.
The government wants to be judged on education. The overall exam results are good, but the details raise some questions, while the challenge of raising attainment over the longer term remains. Jamie McIver, Reporting Scotland.
Well, let's cross to Jamie, who's at an exam helpline that's been fielding calls throughout the day. Jamie, so a stable performance, but there's been a notable drop in the number of pupils taking one of the new qualifications, the National 4. Now, what is it, and do we know why there's been a reduction?
Interesting question, Jackie. Now, just to remind you what the National 4 is, it's one of the new qualifications introduced 3 years ago. Broadly speaking, it would be taken by youngsters who in the past would have studied for a standard grade at a general level, or who back in my day may not even have had the chance to do an all grade at all. So that's the people the National 4 is designed for. Interestingly, there's been a significant drop year on year in the number of presentations for National 4. It's down 7,000 on last year, and the reasons for that aren't immediately obvious. It may simply be that as the new system settles in, teachers are in a better position to make informed judgments on what the right qualification for a particular young person to do may be, or it may be that some teachers are simply reluctant to use the National 4. In the past, some teachers have questioned questioned its credibility as a qualification? There's no obvious answer to that question. It's certainly something that merits further investigation, Jackie.
Now, given the government's focus on education and falling standards internationally on those international league tables recently, how will these results feed in to that broader picture?
Well, you certainly can't judge an education system by the exam performance alone. The results themselves I would describe as stable. They're neither up nor down, pretty much steady as she goes. But the government's aim, of course, is to close that gap in attainment between how well youngsters from relatively rich and poor backgrounds do. And there's nothing in the exam results which feed directly into that debate. You just get the broad national headlines. You don't know anything about the backgrounds of the candidates. What the government will certainly welcome, though, is that news that more youngsters from disadvantaged areas are now securing places at university once they get their exam results. Getting more youngsters from our most disadvantaged communities to university is one of the government's long-term priorities, though certainly an awful lot more work needs to be done to meet what are very ambitious targets in that in the longer term.
Thank you very much, Jamie McIver there. A decision on whether to extend the Edinburgh tram line is expected to be made by autumn next year. Councillors are scrutinising the business case for the additional line, which would run from the city centre through Leith and onto Newhaven. If approved, work would be expected to start the following spring. Well, Lisa Summers is at the tram terminus in Edinburgh for us this evening. Lisa.
Well, that's right, Jackie. This is it, the current beginning and the end of the line here in Edinburgh. All 8 miles of it. It stretches from here in York Place out to Edinburgh Airport. We're just waiting for a tram to come in at the moment. And I think it's fair to say that whenever there is any talk of extending the tram line, there's a great deal of nervousness here in the city. And there's a lot of work to be done, I think, particularly with businesses in the Leith Walk area behind me who've been really resistant to having to go through all that disruption again. But councillors have decided that it is time to look forward. They're going to be starting to scrutinise the figures now to see whether the business case stacks up to extend the line from here to the north of the city. After a controversial start, trams have become a popular addition to the capital's transport infrastructure. But cast your mind back to 2010 and the council was forced to put the buffers on its plans to run the line down to Leith. Roads had been dug up and had to be resurfaced. It wasn't a happy time. But councillors are now about to begin assessing the business case to get the line back up and running. Leith is the most densely populated part of Scotland. Combine that with the lowest car ownership in the city and the council believes the business case is clear. Many in Leith will be sceptical, and across the capital there will be concerns of a council making the same mistake again.
We're making sure that when we finally go with a final decision, that the process we have engaged in will not only make sure that the tram business case stacks up, but that all the assumptions stack up on the cost of the project, on the level of disruption. The more time we spend planning now, the less time the contractor will spend on site causing disruption.
The estimated cost of the extension is £165 million. It's thought the first passengers could be on board by 2022. So if the plans are approved, work could start in the spring of 2019, and it is thought that it could boost passenger numbers up to 14 million. But councillors will, of course, have an eye on the public trams inquiry that's still trying to get to the bottom of what went wrong with the original project, and they won't want to make a final decision on any go-ahead for an extension until they've taken on board any recommendations from that.
Thank you very much, Lisa Summers. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman suffered serious head injuries in an incident in Dundee. And police investigating the murder of a man found stabbed in Paisley last month have issued descriptions of 2 men they want to speak to. The world's biggest landmine clearing organisation, Dumfrieshire's Halo Trust, has received an £8 million funding boost from the UK government. It's part of a 3-year, multi-million-pound strategy aimed at eradicating landmines globally. Willie Johnson can tell us more.
The Halo Trust has been clearing mines from war zones around the world for nearly 3 decades. 20 years ago, Princess Diana highlighted its work in Angola, and mine clearance became a global priority. It remains work in progress.
When we think about the extent of landmines and the fact that they are such an indiscriminate weapon.
Today, the Secretary of State for International Development released the first instalment of £100 million pledged by the UK government towards mine clearance in the next 3 years.
Over the last 20 years alone, over 100,000 people have died because of mines, landmines, and the work of HALO and others is instrumental in clearing that land to make sure that land can become in use again. Communities can go back and live on the land, farm the land, children can play in that land. And we want to stop the abhorrent impact of landmines and make sure that the United Kingdom is at the forefront of that.
Most of the money will be spent in hotspots in Africa, the Middle East and Southeast Asia. But some will trickle down to suppliers in Scotland, such as this armoured vehicle specialist in Dumfries.
It's very significant for us. We've worked with HALO for a number of years. And their requirement is always there, but it always comes down to funding for them. So if they haven't got the money, they can't procure the items that they need.
The mine clearer's task is made more difficult and dangerous by the trend in warfare away from laying traditional minefields towards random booby traps or improvised explosive devices.
So we're dealing now with not only landmines, but cluster munitions, artillery ammunition, mortar ammunition, and any other forms of lethal explosive.
Does that make it more challenging, more dangerous?
Yeah, it certainly does, and we have a range of expertise to deal with that.
The current target is to declare the world landmine-free by 2025. There's optimism that the level of funding promised today will help fulfil that goal. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland, Dumfriesshire.
A retired policeman has described the devastation caused by a fatal crash at the Jim Clark rally in May 2014. The Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson has appeared to break with UK government policy on immigration. In a newspaper article, she asks if the 100,000 net migration target is correct and calls for a mature debate on the issue. Labour says the party is in open warfare. Well, I'm joined by our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr. Andrew, why is Ruth Davidson saying this now?
Well, Jackie, I think it's very clear that Ruth Davidson is trying to spark a debate here. She opens her article in the Daily Telegraph by saying we need to talk about immigration. So just on those 2 points in the UK government policy, she questions that 100,000 net migration target. And the second point is she questions if international students should also be included in that. Now, as you mentioned, Labour say the party is in open warfare, seeing it as an attack on a weakened Prime Minister, Theresa May, of course. But the Scottish Conservatives are saying, well, she's trying to merely open a conversation.
For too long, the debate around immigration has been sort of hijacked by those who'd want to divide us, and I think what's important is actually we have a real grown-up debate about what sort of immigration system we want for Scotland and the United Kingdom in the future.
Well, it's clear that the Tory immigration policy is so wrong-headed and so irrational that even Ruth Davidson's wanting to distance herself from it now, such as the embarrassment that the Scottish Conservatives seem to have about the nature of Theresa May's unstable and chaotic government.
So, Jackie, Labour insisting there the UK government is chaotic and immigration policy is chaotic too. Now, Downing Street said it was a purely party matter. The Conservatives don't recognise what Labour are seeing, of course. But we might be seeing more of this from Ruth Davidson. She is very much an invigorated leader, of course, after her success at the general election. The Tories are saying she's very much her own woman, so maybe watch this space.
Thank you very much, Andrew. An offer by BT to provide broadband to 99% of the UK risks extending the company's rural monopoly. Well, that's according to the Scottish Government. The Rural Affairs Secretary, Fergus Ewing, has written to the UK Government accusing it of thrashing out a deal with BT in private. And our Rural Affairs correspondent Kevin Keane joins us from Aberdeen. Kevin, this row seems to be intensifying.
Yes, and it's essentially a row over what constitutes super-fast broadband, essentially a disagreement over some fairly abstract numbers. The Scottish Government is involved in a rollout at the moment of internet speeds across the whole of Scotland of up to 30 megabits per second. They say that that pretty fast connection speed is necessary to future-proof the system. As more and more of us have households with multiple devices, we might watch the television through things like the BBC iPlayer or take part in online gaming. The proposition from BT to the UK government is for a rollout of a minimum of 10 megabits, megabits. So that's about a third of the speed that the Scottish Government is proposing. Now, today Fergus Ewing wrote to the UK Government saying that this offer frustrates their plans for Scotland and that it risks entrenching or even extending BT's monopoly position in rural areas. And he wants for there to be set up some kind of steering group to look at this proposal and related issues. BT says that its offer is for a minimum of 10 megabits per second and that many people will actually get much faster speeds than that. The Culture Secretary, she says that any decision that is taken will be taken as part of a wider consultation and she'll ensure that the consumers get the best possible deal.
Thank you very much, Kevin Keane there.